The manager slammed the check presenter onto the counter and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "If you can't pay, you leave. Christmas or not." The room froze. Forks paused midair. Coffee stopped pouring. And the woman didn't flinch. Snow pressed against the diner windows like a held breath. Outside Lake Erie, wind rattled the glass. Inside, the lights were too bright, the floor too clean, the rules too sharp. The clock above the grill read 7:28 in the evening. Christmas Eve. Evan Caldwell sat alone in the back booth, shoulders squared, hands folded, coat still on. He looked like a man passing through. No watch, no ring, no phone on the table. His boots were scuffed, his hair needed a trim. The waitress had asked if he wanted the senior discount. He'd smiled and said no. He hadn't come for the food. He came because this diner used to be open when his father worked nights, because it smelled the same, because it asked nothing of him. He wanted quiet. He wanted to disappear. The woman stood at the counter with her son tucked tight against her side. He was maybe 7, too thin for winter. His sneakers were soaked through. He clutched a folded paper bag to his chest like it might break. "I said I'll pay," she repeated steady. "I just need the check corrected." The manager laughed once sharp. "You ordered the turkey plate. That's the price." She slid the receipt back across. "You charged me twice for the same meal." The manager leaned in. "You telling me how to do my job?" Her jaw set. Not angry, controlled. The kind of calm that came from long practice. "I'm telling you what your receipt says." The boy looked up at her. She didn't look down. She kept her eyes on the man in front of her. That's what Evan noticed first. Not fear, not pleading. Focus. The waitress hovered behind the manager, biting her lip. 2 truckers at the window booth muttered. A couple near the door watched uneasy. No one stepped in. Evan felt something tighten behind his ribs. He hadn't moved in years unless it mattered. He stayed still now, listening. The manager snatched the receipt. "You eat, you pay." "That's how it works." She didn't raise her voice. "Not when it's wrong." He glanced at the boy. "You trying to pull something holiday scam?" The word scam landed hard. The boy's shoulders hunched. The woman turned slightly, just enough to block him. A shield, quiet, deliberate. "Check the register," she said. "Or call the owner." The manager's face flushed. "Owner's not here, and you're holding up the line." She took a breath. Evan saw it, measured, deep, the kind of breath taken before a fall or a stand. "Then call the police," she said. "I'll wait." A ripple moved through the room. The waitress whispered, "Frank." "Don't," he snapped. He pulled out his phone. "Fine. We'll do it your way." The boy tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, it's okay. We can go." She knelt, eyes finally softening. "No, sweetheart. We don't leave when we didn't do anything wrong." Evan's fingers curled once, then flattened. He watched the boy's shoes dripping onto the tile. Watched the woman's hands. Red knuckles. No gloves. A small cut on her thumb healed wrong. A life written in details. The manager spoke into the phone. "Yeah. Got a customer refusing to pay. Says the bill's wrong." "Yeah. Christmas Eve. Refusing to pay." Evan exhaled through his nose. He glanced around. Everyone heard the same lie. Everyone let it stand. The door chimed as a gust of cold swept in. A patrol officer stepped inside, stamping snow from his boots. He took in the room. The manager pointed. "That's them." The officer approached. Young. Tired. His badge caught the light. "Ma'am." She stood. Straight. "Officer, I was charged twice for one meal. I asked for it to be fixed. I offered to pay the correct amount." The manager cut in. "She's causing a scene." The officer looked at the receipt, then at the register screen. Then back at the manager. A pause. Not long. Just enough. "Sir," the officer said, "the receipt shows—" "Are you taking her side?" the manager snapped. The officer's jaw tightened. He lowered his voice. "I'm taking the facts." Silence spread. Thick, the kind that pressed on the ears. The manager swore under his breath. He tapped the screen. Hard. Fine. Whatever. He shoved a corrected receipt forward. "Pay and go." The woman didn't move. "You accused my son of stealing." The room held its breath again. The manager laughed brittle. "You want an apology too?" She met his eyes. "Yes." The officer didn't intervene. He waited. Evan felt a strange heat rise in his chest. He hadn't planned to speak tonight. He rarely did. Words were levers. You used them when you meant to move something. The manager scoffed. "This is ridiculous." The boy looked at his mother, then at the door, then back at her. He didn't cry. He waited. Evan stood. The sound of the booth sliding back cut clean through the room. Heads turned. He walked forward steps, even breath steady. He stopped beside the counter, close enough to feel the heat from the grill. "Apologize," Evan said. The manager turned, startled. "Mind your business." Evan didn't raise his voice. "You made it everyone's business when you lied." The officer glanced at him. Took him in. Ordinary coat, worn boots, no edge of threat. The manager sneered. "You with them?" Evan looked at the woman, at the boy, then back. "No." "Then sit down." Evan leaned a hand on the counter. The laminate was chipped, sticky. "You accused a child of a crime he didn't commit. On Christmas Eve, in front of a room full of witnesses." The manager's face darkened. "I can ask you to leave." "You can," Evan said, "or you can say you're sorry and move on." The waitress's eyes flicked between them. The truckers stopped talking. The officer stayed silent. The manager laughed again, louder. "And if I don't," Evan's gaze didn't waver. "Then this becomes a different night." A beat. "Just one." The manager squared his shoulders. "Get out!" Evan nodded once. He reached into his coat pocket. Not for a wallet. Not for a phone. He pulled out a folded card and set it on the counter. Plain. White. No logo. Just a name and a number. "Before you decide," Evan said, "call that number." The manager scoffed, then froze. His eyes caught the name. His face drained of color. He picked up the card with shaking fingers. The officer noticed, stepped closer. "Sir." The manager swallowed. He cleared his throat, looked at Evan, looked at the woman. "I'm sorry." The word fell flat, forced, but it was there. The woman nodded once. "Thank you." She paid the corrected amount. "Exactly." She took the receipt. She took her son's hand. As they turned to leave, the boy looked back at Evan, hesitated, then nodded. Small. Serious. Evan felt it land like a weight and a gift at the same time. The door chimed. Cold rushed in. Then out. The diner breathed again. The manager stared at the card like it might bite him. "Who are you?" Evan slid it back into his pocket. He didn't answer. He returned to his booth, sat. The waitress brought his coffee without asking. Her hand shook. Outside, the woman wrapped her coat tighter around her son and stepped into the snow. She didn't know the man who had stood up. She didn't know why he did it. She only knew he hadn't looked away. Evan lifted his cup. The coffee was cold. He drank it anyway. Across the room, the officer watched him with new eyes. Evan met his gaze just for a moment. No smile, no challenge. Control. Christmas lights flickered in the window. Somewhere beyond the glass, a city kept moving. Evan Caldwell sat alone, underestimated, breathing evenly as the night began to bend towards something it hadn't planned to become. Evan stayed in the booth long after the door stopped swinging, long after the truckers paid, and left long after the manager retreated into the kitchen with his pride in pieces. The diner slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but something had shifted. Not loudly, subtly, like a chair moved an inch out of place and never put back. The waitress refilled his coffee without meeting his eyes. On the house she murmured. Her voice carried gratitude and fear at the same time. Evan nodded once. He didn't thank her. Gratitude created debts, and tonight was already heavy with them. Outside, the woman walked fast, her son struggling to keep up on the icy sidewalk. Evan watched through the window until they disappeared past the laundromat sign blinking half-lit. He didn't follow. Not yet. Intervening was one thing, intruding was another. The officer lingered near the door, pretending to check his radio. Then he came over. "Sir," he said quietly, "you didn't need to do that?" Evan looked at him. "Someone did." The officer hesitated. "That card you gave him. That wasn't... It was enough," Evan said. The officer studied him, curiosity sharp now. "You local..." Evan took a sip of coffee. "I used to be." The officer nodded, reading the answer for what it was. He left without another word. Evan finished his coffee. Put a few bills on the table anyway. He stood, shrugged into his coat, and stepped back into the cold. The air hit him hard, clean, and biting. Snow creaked under his boots. Across the street, the woman and the boy were gone. He walked. No destination, just movement. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He stopped under a streetlight and checked the screen. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Caldwell," a man's voice said. Tight. Professional. "This is Daniel Mercer. I'm the regional director for North Shore Hospitality." Evan closed his eyes briefly. "Yes. I just received a call from one of our location managers. There was an incident." "There was," Evan said. A pause. Papers rustled. "I want you to know we take allegations seriously. Then review the security footage," Evan said. "Start at 7:12 in the evening." Another pause longer. "You were present." "I was." "And you chose to intervene." "Yes." Mercer exhaled slowly. "I wish you'd called me directly." Evan's voice stayed flat. "I wish your manager hadn't accused a child of theft." Silence. Then quieter, understood. Evan looked down the street. Christmas lights wrapped around bare trees. Families moved past shop windows, laughter trailing behind them like exhaust. "You'll handle it." "Yes," Mercer said, "immediately." Evan ended the call. He stood there a moment longer, then turned back toward the diner parking lot. His car waited alone. He unlocked it, slid inside, and sat without starting the engine. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered without looking. "Dad." The word hit him harder than the cold. "Hannah," he said. Her voice was small, distant, wrapped in background noise. "Mom said you called earlier." "I did. We were at Mark's parents' house. It was loud. I figured." She hesitated. "Mom said you might come visit next month." Evan swallowed. "I might." Another pause. He could hear a television in the background. Laughter that wasn't his. "Did you have a good Christmas?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I got the telescope you sent. I'm glad." "I looked at the moon," she added. "It was really bright." Evan closed his eyes. "I'm sorry I wasn't there." She didn't answer right away. Then softer. "It's okay. You're busy." The lie hurt more than anger would have. "I'm not too busy to call," he said. "I should have done it earlier." She yawned. "I'm tired." "I know." "Good night, Dad." "Good night." The line went dead. Evan stared at the dark screen until it dimmed. He leaned back, rested his head against the seat, and breathed. In. Out. Controlled. The same way he'd learned to do when markets crashed, when partners betrayed him, when silence followed losses too large to name. He started the engine and drove. The woman reached her apartment with numb fingers. 3rd floor, no elevator. She carried the boy when his legs finally gave out his head, heavy on her shoulder. Inside the apartment was dim and cold. She set him on the couch, peeled off his wet sneakers, wrapped him in a blanket. "You okay, Miles?" she asked. He nodded, eyes already closing. "Mom?" "Yes." "Why was that man mad at you?" She brushed his hair back. "He wasn't mad at me. He was wrong." "And the other man?" She thought of Evan's face. Calm. Still. He didn't like wrong things. Miles yawned. "I liked him." She smiled despite herself. "Go to sleep." After he drifted off, she went to the kitchen and counted what little cash she had left. Enough for groceries if she skipped the bus and walked. Again. She pressed her forehead to the cabinet door and let the tension drain out of her shoulders. Not tears, just exhaustion. Her phone buzzed. She jumped, heart racing. She checked the screen. Unknown number. She didn't answer. It buzzed again. She hesitated, then picked up. "Ms. Harper," Evan said. She stiffened. "How did you get my number?" "You paid with a card," he said. I remembered the name. A beat. "Is something wrong?" "No," he said. "I wanted to check if you got home safely." She glanced at the couch, at Miles curled under the blanket. "We did. I'm glad." Silence stretched between them. She waited for the rest. He didn't rush. "Look," she said finally, "what you did back there." "I didn't do it for thanks." "I know," she said. "That's why I'm calling it out." Another pause. "I crossed a line." She considered that. "You stopped someone from humiliating my son." "That's not a line." Evan exhaled slowly. "Still, I don't make a habit of inserting myself into people's lives." And yet she said quietly, "You did." "Yes." She leaned against the counter. The refrigerator hummed. Why Evan didn't answer right away? When he did, his voice was lower. Because I didn't want him thinking that was normal, being talked to like that. Her grip tightened on the phone. "Thank you." He hesitated. "If you ever need anything." "No," she said, sharper than intended. She softened her tone. "I mean, I appreciate it. But we're okay. I figured you'd say that. That doesn't mean it isn't true." "I know." Another silence. Less tense now. "Almost human," Miles Evans said. "That's his name, right?" "Yes. He handled himself well." She smiled. "He's had practice." That landed heavier than she meant it to. Evan felt it. He nodded, though she couldn't see it. "So have you." She closed her eyes. "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." "Good night, Ms. Harper." They hung up. Evan sat in his car for a long time afterward, engine off, snow settling on the windshield. The city moved around him unaware. He thought of the way Miles had stood, the way his mother hadn't backed down, the way the manager's voice had cracked when power shifted hands. He reached into his pocket and felt the edge of the card still there. He hadn't meant to reveal himself. Not tonight. But sometimes leverage was the only language people understood. Inside the diner, cameras recorded everything. Inside boardrooms, reports would be written. Consequences would follow. Not because Evan demanded them, but because the system worked when someone forced it to look at itself. He thought of Hannah, of Miles, of the space between them that money could cross but never close on its own. Evan Caldwell turned the key, pulled back onto the road, and drove through the falling snow, carrying a quiet certainty with him. The night hadn't ended where it began, and neither had he. The termination email went out at 8:43 in the morning, and by 8:52, the diner manager was no longer employed. Evan didn't send it. He didn't need to. Systems corrected themselves when pressure was applied in the right place. He read the notification on his tablet while the city woke outside his window. Snowplows scraped the streets. Radios murmured. Somewhere a bell rang for morning service. Evan closed the tablet and let the quiet return. He had learned long ago that satisfaction was a dangerous feeling. It dulled edges. He preferred clarity. His phone rang. A familiar number this time. Daniel Evans said. "We reviewed the footage," Mercer replied. His voice was careful now. "There were prior complaints. This wasn't an isolated incident." Evan looked at the skyline, steel and glass cutting into pale sky. "It never is. We're issuing a formal apology to the customer," Mercer continued. "And retraining staff at the location," Good Evan said. "And the officer. We spoke to the department. He acted appropriately." Evan nodded. "Then we're done." Mercer hesitated. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you were there." Evan ended the call. He didn't sit with the praise. He moved. Shower, coffee, coat. He left the apartment and let the cold wake him fully. Across town, Nora Harper stood at the bus stop with Miles tucked under her arm, his backpack too big for his shoulders. The bus was late. Again. She checked the time, then the street, then the sky. Gray. Heavy. The kind of morning that promised nothing and demanded everything. Miles looked up. "Mom." "Yes." "Is the diner man gone?" She tightened her scarf. "What makes you ask that?" "I heard Mrs. Lopez talking," he said. "She said he yelled at a lady once." Nora exhaled. "He doesn't work there anymore." Miles considered this. "Because he was mean." "Because he was wrong," she said. She caught herself. "And because sometimes wrong things have consequences." The bus hissed to a stop. They climbed aboard. Miles took the window seat and pressed his forehead to the glass. Nora watched her reflection, older than she felt, steadier than she'd been forced to become. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't check it. Not yet. Evan walked past the diner an hour later. He didn't go in. He watched from across the street as a new manager unlocked the door, young, nervous, adjusting her name tag twice before flipping the sign to open. Change was visible if you knew where to look. He turned toward the park. The snow there lay untouched, soft as a held secret. He sat on a bench and let the cold bite through his coat. He thought of Hannah at school, the telescope by her window, the moon bright and unreachable. He thought of Miles's soaked sneakers, the way the boy had stood without shrinking. His phone buzzed. This time he looked. "Unknown number." He answered. "Caldwell." "Mr. Caldwell," a woman said. Older. Measured. "My name is Ruth Ellison. I'm the owner of Ellison Diner." Evan closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." "I wanted to apologize," she said. "Personally." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe her," Ruth replied. "And her son. I failed to see what was happening in my own place." Evan listened. Ruth continued quieter. "I built that diner with my husband 40 years ago. We believed in treating people right. Somewhere along the way, I stopped paying attention. You're paying attention now." "Yes," she said, "and I wanted you to know that I offered her a voucher for future meals." Evan's jaw tightened. "She won't accept it." "I thought as much," Ruth said gently. "So I offered her something else. Temporary work, office help, hours that work around her child's schedule." Evan opened his eyes. Snow drifted down slow and clean. She won't like charity. It's not charity, Ruth said. It's a job. She starts next week if she wants it. Evan nodded. Thank you. Ruth hesitated. May I ask who you are? Evan smiled once thin. Someone who remembers what your diner used to mean. He ended the call and sat with the relief longer than he expected. Not pride. Relief. The kind that came when a weight shifted off someone else's shoulders. Nora answered her phone on her lunch break, standing in the narrow alley behind the store, breath fogging. Hello, this is Ruth Ellison, the woman said. I own the diner you visited last night. Nora's back straightened. Yes. I wanted to apologize, Ruth said, and to make you an offer, if you're interested. Nora listened, heart-pounding suspicion sharp. When Ruth finished, Nora spoke carefully. You don't know me. I know enough, Ruth replied. You didn't shout, you didn't back down, and you paid what you owed. Nora closed her eyes. I can't take favors. It's not a favor, Ruth said. It's work. Nora thought of the bus, the warnings, the cut hours. She thought of Miles doing homework at the counter because there was nowhere else. I'll come by, she said finally. To talk. That's all I'm asking. When the call ended, Nora leaned against the brick wall and let her knees soften. She didn't cry. She breathed. That evening, Evan received a message from Hannah's mother. Short, precise, logistics for the next visit. He read it twice, then replied with a single line. I'll be there Friday afternoon. Thank you. He put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. He didn't know how to be present without taking over. He didn't know how to fix what time had broken. He only knew how to show up. The knock came at his door just after 6. He didn't expect anyone. He opened it to find Ruth Ellison standing there, coat button, tight eyes sharp. I hope this isn't inappropriate, she said. But I wanted to see you. Evan stepped aside. Come in. She looked around, taking in the view, the quiet, the absence of warmth. You live alone. Yes. She sat hands folded. You didn't ask for anything in return. I didn't want anything. Ruth studied him. That's rare. Evan met her gaze. So is remembering. She nodded. The woman. Nora. She's proud. It will take time. I know. Ruth stood. Whatever you're doing, be careful. People get hurt when power moves without warning. Evan walked her to the door. Power doesn't hurt people. Silence does. After she left, Evan sat back down and let the evening stretch. The city lights flickered on one by one. He thought of Nora standing her ground, of Ruth reopening her eyes, of Hannah waiting. His phone buzzed again. A text this time. Thank you for yesterday. We talked to the diner owner. I don't know what you said, but it mattered. Nora. Evan stared at the words. He typed, typed again. I didn't say much. You did. He sent it. He stood and poured himself a drink he didn't finish. Outside, snow kept falling, rewriting the city in quiet layers. Across town, Nora sat at the small kitchen table while Miles colored beside her. Mom, he said, not looking up. Are we going back to the diner? She smiled, careful and real. Maybe, but not the way you think. He nodded, satisfied. Okay. Nora watched his hand move, confident now, lines bold. She felt the night shift under her feet, subtle but undeniable. Somewhere in the city, a man with more power than he let on was choosing where to stand. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like the ground beneath her might hold. Nora arrived at the diner before the sun had fully cleared the rooftops, the sky still pale and undecided. The sign buzzed softly as she pushed the door open, the bell chiming once tentative. The smell hit her immediately. Coffee, toast, old wood. It was the same place, but not the same feeling. Ruth Ellison stood behind the counter with a clipboard gray hair pulled back, glasses low on her nose. She looked up and smiled, not warm, but respectful. "You're early. I didn't want to be late," Nora said. Ruth nodded as if that confirmed something she already believed. "Good. Come on back." The office was small, cramped, lined with old photos. Black and white shots of the diner when it first opened, couples smiling, kids with milkshakes. Ruth gestured to a chair. "This isn't a handout," she said before Nora could speak. "You'll work. You'll earn every hour. I don't bend rules for sympathy." Nora met her gaze. "I don't want bent rules." Ruth studied her for a moment longer, then smiled faintly. "I thought so." They went over schedules, pay, responsibilities, office work, inventory, bookkeeping help, hours that started after school drop-off and ended before dinner. It wasn't perfect, but it was possible. Nora felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not relief. Caution mixed with hope. "Your son," Ruth said, flipping a page. "Miles." "Yes. If there's an emergency, you leave. No questions." Nora's throat tightened. "Thank you." Ruth waved it off. "Don't thank me. Do the job well. That's thanks enough." When Nora stepped back out into the dining area, the morning crowd had begun to trickle in. Truckers, retirees. A young waitress she didn't recognize poured coffee with careful hands. The new manager, Angela, stood near the register posture, straight eyes alert. She nodded at Nora, not unkind. Nora walked out into the cold, feeling taller than when she'd entered. Across town, Evan sat in a conference room that smelled like polished wood and quiet money. 3 men and 1 woman sat across from him. Suits, immaculate voices measured. The quarterly review had turned into a strategic retreat without him noticing. "You've been disengaged," one of them said carefully. Evan leaned back in his chair. "I've been selective." "Selective doesn't mean absent." "It does when presence is wasted," Evan replied. The woman cleared her throat. "We're concerned about perception." Evan smiled slightly. "I'm not." Silence stretched. They shifted. Evan led it. He had learned that silence was an instrument. "I'm stepping back from day-to-day oversight," he said finally. "Effective immediately." "That's not—" "It is," Evan said. "I'll remain on the board. You'll run operations. If something burns, call me. Otherwise, let it breathe." They exchanged glances. Fear flickered. Opportunity, too. After the meeting, Evan didn't return to his office. He left the building and walked. No driver. No coat buttoned properly. Just him and the city. He passed the diner without stopping. He didn't want to be seen as hovering. Control had to be earned by absence sometimes. His phone buzzed. A text from Hannah's mother. Flight confirmed. Friday afternoon. He stared at the screen longer than necessary, then replied with a simple acknowledgement. Nora picked Miles up from school that afternoon, with a new routine already forming in her mind. He ran to her backpack, bouncing. "Mom," he said, "Mrs. Grant says I can stay for art club on Tuesdays." Nora smiled. "That's great. Can I—" She hesitated. Tuesdays were long. Then she remembered the office schedule, the bus, the possibilities. "Yes," she said. "We'll figure it out." He grinned. "Okay." As they walked home, they passed the park. Miles slowed. "That man," he said suddenly. "The one from the diner." Nora's steps faltered. "What about him?" "Will we see him again?" She considered the question. Honest, direct. "I don't know. Miles nodded, accepting uncertainty better than most adults. He didn't look mad, he said. Just serious. That's a good word for him, Nora said. That evening, as Nora sorted papers at the kitchen table, her phone rang. Evan's name lit the screen. She stared at it, then answered. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Evan replied. "I heard from Ruth." Nora exhaled. "She offered me work." "I didn't ask her to, I know," Nora said. "That's why I accepted." Silence settled comfortable now. Not empty. "I'm glad," Evan said finally. "So am I," she replied. She hesitated. "You didn't have to do any of this." "I know." "Then why keep checking?" Evan's answer came slower. "Because once you see something wrong and walk away, it becomes your fault too." Nora closed her eyes. "You don't know me." "No," Evan said. "But I know that look. I've worn it." She didn't ask him to explain. She didn't need to. "Miles starts art club Tuesday," she said instead. "That's good. He's talented." "I could tell." She smiled despite herself. "You saw one drawing." That was enough. They said goodnight without ceremony. Friday arrived faster than either of them expected. Evan stood at the airport gate, hands in his coat pockets, watching families spill out of arriving flights. Laughter, tension, reunions both awkward and joyful. When Hannah appeared taller, hair pulled back, eyes scanning something in his chest, loosened. "Dad," she said, and walked to him. Not ran. Walked. He knelt anyway and hugged her, breathing her in like proof. "Hi, kiddo. I'm not a kid," she said automatically, then smiled. "But hi." They drove in comfortable silence. At the hotel, they unpacked together. Evan let her choose dinner. Pizza, extra cheese. He listened more than he talked. Later, as she lay on the bed scrolling through her phone, she asked, "Do you live here now?" "No," Evan said. "I live somewhere else." "Why are you here so much?" Evan considered lying, then decided against it. "Because I forgot how." She looked at him. "Forgot how what?" "To show up," he said. She studied him serious. "You're here now." "I am." That night, after Hannah fell asleep, Evan stood by the window and watched the city lights. He thought of Nora in her apartment, paperwork spread out, of Miles coloring with new confidence, of Hannah breathing steadily behind him. The world felt closer than it had in years, not smaller, closer. On Sunday afternoon, Evan walked Hannah back to the airport. She hugged him tighter this time. "Text me," she said. "I will. And don't disappear." Evan nodded. "I won't." When she was gone, the terminal felt hollow. Evan didn't leave right away. He sat, watched planes take off, watched people let go and hold on. His phone buzzed. A message from Nora. "Miles asked if we could go to the park later. He wants to draw the trees before the snow melts." Evan stared at the screen. He typed, erased, typed again. "If you're comfortable with it, I'd like to come by. No pressure." The reply came after a pause. "Okay, but just the park." Evan smiled. Small, real. Outside, the sky darkened. The city prepared for evening. 3 lives moving on separate tracks, edged closer together, not by force or money, but by time, consistency, and the quiet choice to stay when it would have been easier to leave. The park smelled like wet leaves and cold iron, the kind of late winter afternoon that made everything feel exposed. Evan arrived early and stayed standing, hands in his coat pockets, watching parents cluster near benches while children scattered toward the swings like released breath. Nora came a few minutes later with Miles' bundled tight sketchbook under his arm. She slowed when she saw Evan assessing, then nodded once. No smile yet. "Just acknowledgement." "Hi," Evan said. "Hi," Nora replied. "We won't stay long." "That's fine," Evan said. "I didn't bring a schedule." Miles stopped a few steps away and looked up at Evan. He didn't rush. He didn't hide. He studied. "You said you liked my drawing," he said. "I did," Evan replied. "I meant it." Miles considered that. Then he turned and headed for the bench near the pond. "I'm going to draw the ducks." Nora watched him go, then exhaled. He decides for himself. He should, Evan said. They followed at a distance. Evan didn't walk beside her. He walked half a step behind, giving space without making it obvious. The bench was cold. Nora sat. Evan remained standing until she glanced up, then sat at the far end, leaving a careful gap between them. Miles opened his sketchbook and began, tongue tucked slightly between his teeth. Evan watched the pencil move. Confident lines. No erasing. The boy committed to every mark. "He doesn't second guess," Evan said quietly. Nora's mouth curved despite herself. He learned early that hesitating wastes time. Evan nodded. He understood that language. They sat in silence for a while, broken only by the scratch of graphite and the distant sound of traffic. "I won't stay long," Evan said again. "I just wanted to be here." Nora glanced at him. Why Evan didn't answer right away. He looked at the water, the ducks drifting without concern. "Because when I didn't show up before, it cost me years." Nora's gaze sharpened. "This isn't the same." "No," Evan agreed. "But the lesson is." Miles looked up. "Mom," he said, "can Mr. Caldwell see this one?" Nora hesitated, then nodded. "If you want." Miles walked over and held the sketchbook out to Evan. The drawing was rough, but alive. Ducks. Water ripples. A crooked bench. 3 figures sketched lightly in the background, barely there. Evan took the book carefully. "You caught the movement," he said. "That's hard to do." Miles smiled, quick and gone. "I watch first." "That's smart," Evan said. He handed the book back. "You should keep doing that." Miles returned to his bench. Nora watched Evan's hands as he sat back. Steady. Unshowy. "You're careful," she said. Evan met her eyes. "So are you." "I have to be. So do I." That surprised her. She studied him again, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the restraint in his posture. "You don't look like someone who has to be careful." Evan smiled without humor. "That's because people confuse control with safety." The wind picked up. Miles shivered. Nora stood. "That's enough for today." Miles groaned but packed up. Evan stood too. "Thank you for letting me come." Nora nodded. "You didn't overstep." "That matters." "It does." They walked toward the park exit. When they reached the sidewalk, Miles stopped. "Are you coming again?" he asked Evan. Evan looked to Nora first. She didn't answer for him. She waited. "If your mom says it's okay," Evan said. Miles nodded, satisfied. "Okay." That night, Evan returned to his apartment and didn't turn on the lights. He stood by the window city spread below and felt the unfamiliar pull of anticipation without urgency. His phone buzzed. "Daniel Mercer," Evan answered. "Yes." "There's something you should know," Mercer said. "A reporter called. About the diner. About you." Evan closed his eyes. "From where local paper," Mercer replied. "They're asking questions. About your involvement. About past complaints." Evan's voice stayed even. "I didn't involve myself to be visible." "I know," Mercer said, "but visibility follows pressure." "Handle it," Evan said. "No statements. No names. That may not be possible." Evan opened his eyes. The city looked back at him indifferent. "Then make it uninteresting." After the call ended, Evan poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. He thought of Nora's caution, Miles's focus, Hannah's telescope pointed skyward. He thought of how quickly noise could poison quiet. Across town, Nora folded laundry while Miles colored at the table. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "This is Claire Bennett. I'm a reporter with the Lakeview Herald. I'm writing about an incident at Ellison Diner and was hoping to speak with you." Nora's stomach dropped. She set the phone face down. Miles looked up. "Mom." "It's nothing." Nora said too quickly. She took a breath and picked the phone back up. She typed erased, typed again. "I don't want to be part of a story." The reply came fast. "I understand, but people are interested. A powerful man stepping in, a mother accused unfairly. It resonates." Nora's fingers tightened. Powerful man. She glanced toward the hallway, toward the door Evan had never crossed. She typed again. "Please don't contact me again." She blocked the number and set the phone aside. Her heart raced. She forced herself to slow her breathing. "What's wrong?" Miles asked. Nothing, she said, and this time she meant it as a promise, not a lie. The next morning, Evan walked into a cafe and felt eyes turn. Not many. Just enough. A whisper here. A glance there. He ordered coffee and took it to go. His phone buzzed. Nora's name. "I think a reporter is calling people," she said without preamble. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the edge. "I know," Evan said. "I'm sorry." "I don't want this," Nora said. "I didn't ask for it." "I won't let it touch you," Evan replied. There was a pause. "You can't control everything." "I can control this," Evan said. "Trust me." She hesitated. "I don't want to owe you." "You don't," Evan said. "This is about boundaries, not debts." Another pause. "Okay." "Okay," Evan echoed. When the call ended, Evan changed direction. He went back to his building up to the top floor into a conference room he hadn't used in months. He called Mercer back, then Ruth, then someone else. Quiet calls, direct language, no threats. Just facts and leverage placed carefully like weight on a scale. By afternoon, the reporter's interest cooled. By evening, the story shifted. Workplace conduct, training reforms, an owner addressing past failures. No names, no saviors. Evan returned home as the city darkened. He stood by the window again, but this time he didn't feel the pull to retreat. He felt the weight of choice. His phone buzzed. A message from Nora. "Miles wants to know if you really meant what you said about watching first." Evan smiled. He typed back, "I did. It's how you learn what matters." The reply came with a pause. "Thank you. For today." Evan set the phone down. He didn't chase the feeling. He let it exist. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the small corrections being made within it. Evan Caldwell stood alone, not lonely, holding a line between power and presence, knowing the next step would require more than restraint. It would require risk. The first real test didn't come with raised voices or public scenes. It arrived quietly wrapped in a thin white envelope slipped under Nora's apartment door on a Tuesday morning. She found it when she came back from dropping Miles at school grocery bag in one hand, keys in the other. The envelope had no stamp, no return address, just her name written carefully, deliberately. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "We know who you are. We know who he is. Be careful." Nora sat down hard on the chair by the door, the paper trembling in her hand. Her pulse roared in her ears. The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the walls closer. She read it again, slower this time, searching for meaning, for context, for anything that made it less threatening. There was nothing else, no signature, no explanation. She folded the paper and slid it into her pocket. She didn't cry. She didn't panic. She did what she always did when something dangerous appeared without warning. She assessed. At the diner office, Ruth noticed immediately. "You're pale." "I'm fine." Nora said, and this time it was a lie she couldn't afford to unpack. Ruth didn't push. She handed Nora a stack of invoices and pointed at the computer. Take your time. Nora nodded, but her focus slipped. Every sound outside the office made her shoulders tighten. Every customer laugh felt too loud. When her phone buzzed at noon, she jumped. Evan's name. She stared at it for a long moment before answering. Hi. You sound far away, Evan said. I need to show you something, Nora replied. But not over the phone. I can be there. No, she said quickly. Not here. A pause. Then, where the park? She said. After school. I'll be there, Evan replied. No questions. At 3:15, Miles ran out of school with his usual burst of energy. Nora smiled for him, steady and practiced. Park day, she said. His face lit up. Can I bring my markers? Yes, she said. All of them. Evan was already there when they arrived, standing near the same bench, hands in his coat pockets, watching the path like a habit he hadn't meant to form. When he saw Nora's face, the calm slipped just enough for concern to surface. What happened? He asked quietly. Nora handed him the paper. Evan read it once, then again. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. Did anyone see who left it? No. When did you find it? This morning. He folded the paper carefully and handed it back. This isn't random. That's what scares me, Nora said. I don't want this bleeding into Miles's life. Evan looked at the boy, now crouched on the ground, lining up markers by color, utterly absorbed. It won't, he said. She turned to him sharp. You don't get to promise that. Evan held her gaze. You're right. I don't. But I can tell you this wasn't meant to hurt you. It was meant to scare you away. From you. Yes. Nora's breath caught. Then maybe it's working. Evan didn't answer immediately. He watched Miles stand and begin drawing the bench again, his small body blocking out the world. If you want me to step back, Evan said finally, say it. Nora looked at him, at the restraint in his posture, at the fact that he hadn't already moved to fix things. I don't want you to disappear, she said. I want you to stop being dangerous. Evan nodded slowly. Then we need to change the rules. That evening, Evan made calls he had avoided for years. Not to Mercer, not to Ruth. He called people who knew how to erase footprints without drawing lines. Lawyers, compliance officers, a former security chief who owed him nothing but answered anyway. By midnight, Evan had a clearer picture. The letter wasn't from the press. It wasn't from Ellison Diner. It wasn't random. It came from a small consulting firm that specialized in reputation management for corporations that didn't like surprises. Someone had noticed his involvement and decided to apply pressure where it might bend him. He sat at his desk, hands flat on the wood, breathing slowly. This was familiar terrain. He'd navigated worse, but never with someone else standing in the line of fire. His phone buzzed. Hannah. Dad, she said. Are you busy? Not too busy, he replied. Mom says I can visit you again next month. Evan closed his eyes. I'd like that. There was a pause. You sound tired. I am, Evan admitted. Is it because of work? Partly. And the other part? Evan hesitated, then chose honesty. Because I care about people I didn't expect to. Hannah was quiet. Then, that's not bad. No, Evan said. It's just harder. I think harder is okay, she replied. Easy things break. Evan smiled small and real. You're getting wise. She laughed. I already am. After the call, Evan sat back and made a decision he'd been postponing since the diner. He couldn't keep operating from the shadows, not if others were going to drag Nora into them. The only way to remove the threat was to remove the mystery. The next morning, a statement went out. Not flashy, not defensive, clear. Evan Caldwell, majority stakeholder in North Shore Hospitality, acknowledged intervening in a customer mistreatment incident at a local diner. He emphasized accountability, respect, and corrective action. He declined interviews. The effect was immediate. Interest spiked, then shifted. The narrative changed. No secret benefactor, no shadow figure. Just a man with authority choosing to use it openly. At the diner, Ruth read the article twice, then folded the paper and nodded. "That took guts," she said. Nora said nothing. She watched Miles draw at the counter while she filed receipts. She felt the ground move again, this time more slowly, less violently. That afternoon, Evan didn't go to the park. He sent a message instead. "I made myself visible. That should end it. If it doesn't, I'll step away." The reply came an hour later. "I saw. Miles did too. He asked why your name was in the paper." Evan typed, typed again. "What did you tell him?" "I told him you don't like when people are treated badly, and that sometimes doing the right thing makes noise." A pause. Then another message. He said that made sense. Evan leaned back in his chair and let the breath he'd been holding finally leave his chest. That night, Nora found another envelope under her door. She opened it with steady hands. Inside was nothing, blank paper. She laughed once, sharp and surprised, and closed the door behind her. Across the city, Evan stood by his window lights reflected in the glass and watched the quiet hold. The danger hadn't vanished. It rarely did. But it had shifted. And for the first time since Christmas Eve, he felt something stronger than caution take root. Commitment. Not to control, not to rescue, but to stand where he was seen, even when it cost him. The first time Miles said it out loud, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It happened on a Thursday evening while rain tapped softly against the windows and the apartment smelled like tomato soup. Evan had stopped by only to drop off a folder Ruth had asked him to review. He didn't come in at first. Nora had insisted. Miles was at the table drawing shoulders hunched in concentration. "Mr. Caldwell," Miles said, without looking up, pencil still moving. "Can you hold this?" Evan stepped closer and took the paper before it slid off the table. "Like this?" "Yes." Miles nodded satisfied, then added casually, "You're kind of like a dad." The pencil stopped. The room went very still. Nora's hand froze halfway to the sink. Evan didn't move at all. He felt the words hit him, not sharp, not heavy, just precise, like something placed exactly where it belonged and nowhere else. Miles looked up, then finally registering the silence. "I mean," he said quickly, "not my real dad. I know you're not. I just mean you do dad stuff, like showing up and not yelling, and fixing things without making a big deal." Nora turned slowly. "Miles." He shrugged, suddenly unsure. "What, I didn't say anything bad." Evan crouched to Miles's level, careful, deliberate. "You didn't say anything wrong," he said. His voice was steady, but inside something shifted, reassembled. "But that's a big word, and big words matter." Miles nodded, absorbing this. "Okay." Evan handed the paper back. "And you get to decide what they mean to you." Miles returned to his drawing crisis, averted in his mind. Nora exhaled shakily and turned back to the sink. Later, when Miles was asleep and the rain had turned to mist, Nora stood by the window, arms crossed. Evan waited. He had learned that some moments asked for stillness, not solutions. "I'm sorry," Nora said finally. "He shouldn't put that on you." Evan shook his head. "He didn't put anything on me. It changes things, she said. Yes, Evan replied, but not in a way that scares me. That made her turn. Really look at him. It should. It would have once, Evan said. Before. Before what? Before I learned what disappearing costs. Silence settled between them, not empty but weighted. You don't owe him anything, Nora said. You don't owe me anything. I know, Evan said. That's why I'm still here. She swallowed. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, Evan said. That's not a reason to stop. The next challenge came from a direction Evan had expected and feared in equal measure. Hannah arrived for her visit on Friday afternoon, suitcase rolling behind her, posture guarded. She hugged him, but briefly, like someone testing the ground. You look different, she said as they walked to the car. Evan smiled. That's not good or bad, just true. At dinner that night, she poked at her food. Mom says you've been in the paper. Evan nodded. A little. Are you in trouble? No. Then why does she sound worried? Evan considered the question. Because when people change, others wonder why. Hannah frowned. Are you changing? Yes. She sat back, arms crossed. I don't like surprises. Evan nodded. Neither do I. The meeting wasn't planned as a family event. Evan had suggested it gently. Nora had hesitated. Hannah had agreed with visible reluctance. They met at the park neutral ground Sunday afternoon. Miles was already there, drawing chalk circles on the pavement. When he saw Evan, he waved. When he saw Hannah, he stopped. They stared at each other. Same height. Same cautious curiosity. This is Hannah, Evan said. She's my daughter. Hannah nodded stiffly. Hi. Miles wiped his hands on his jacket. Hi. I'm Miles. A pause. Then Miles said, Do you like drawing? Hannah blinked. Sometimes. I can show you, Miles said. He didn't wait for permission. He handed her a piece of chalk. Nora and Evan watched from the bench, not sitting too close, not too far. She's quiet, Nora said. She's listening, Evan replied. Hannah crouched, tentative at first, then more confident. She added a line to Miles's drawing. He beamed. That's good. Thanks, she said, surprised. Later, as the kids wandered toward the swings, Hannah stopped and turned to Evan. Is he staying? The question was small. The weight was not. I don't know, Evan said honestly. No one's being forced into anything. Hannah nodded, eyes sharp. I don't want to be replaced. Evan crouched, mirroring her height. You can't be. You say that. I know, Evan said. So watch what I do. She studied his face, searching for cracks, finding none she could use. I don't want to share you, she said. Evan didn't argue. I know. That doesn't mean I won't. He smiled softly. That's brave. That night, after Hannah fell asleep on the couch, mid-movie, Evan sat alone and stared at the ceiling. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't distract himself. He let the discomfort stay. Power was easy. Control was familiar. This was neither. At the diner, Ruth watched Nora move through the office with a new kind of confidence. Not louder, not faster, grounded. You're steadier, Ruth observed. Nora smiled faintly. I'm learning to stand without bracing. Good, Ruth said. That means you're not waiting to fall. The story didn't explode. It deepened. Evan didn't move in. He didn't make promises. He kept showing up. School pickups when invited, park benches, quiet dinners, listening more than speaking. Hannah began to linger longer. She started correcting Miles's spelling with mock seriousness. Miles began asking her questions about space. One evening, as they walked home together, Hannah said quietly, He doesn't look at you like he's afraid you'll leave. Evan stopped. Do you? She didn't answer right away. Then I'm learning not to. That night, Nora found Evan standing on the balcony, city lights below. I'm scared, she said. So am I, Evan replied. What if this breaks? Evan turned to her. Then we'll have broken, honestly. That matters. She nodded, tears threatening but held back. You don't rush. I don't run anymore, Evan said. Inside, Miles slept with his sketchbook open beside him. Hannah slept with the telescope pointed at nothing. Outside, rain began again, gentle, persistent. And in the quiet space between caution and hope, something took shape, not because anyone named it, but because no one tried to claim it too soon. The call came at 2:17 in the morning, sharp enough to split the quiet clean in half. Evan was awake already. He'd learned to sleep lightly the way men do when they're waiting for something they can't name. The phone vibrated once on the nightstand. He answered without looking. It's Miles, Nora said. Her voice was tight, controlled, threaded with panic. He can't breathe right. Evan was on his feet before she finished. Where are you? At home. I called an ambulance. They're saying it could be an asthma attack. He's never had one. I'm coming. Evan, I'm coming, he repeated, and the line went dead. He drove through empty streets, traffic lights blinking useless warnings at no one. His hands were steady on the wheel. His thoughts were not. He'd closed billion-dollar deals with less fear than what sat in his chest now. This was not leverage. This was not strategy. This was a child gasping for air. When he reached the building, the ambulance was already there, lights painting the brick red and blue. Nora stood barefoot on the sidewalk in a coat she'd pulled on without buttons, Miles wrapped in a blanket, his breaths shallow, uneven. A paramedic knelt beside him, voice calm, efficient. Evan moved to Nora's side. She didn't look at him. She didn't have to. Her hand found his sleeve fingers digging in like a lifeline. Sir, the paramedic said, glancing up, is he insured? Nora swallowed. We're between plans. Evan felt the reflex rise. His mouth opened. Nora shook her head once. A warning. A boundary. Even now. The paramedic nodded, already moving. We're going to take him in. At the hospital, time stretched and snapped in strange ways. Forms, questions. A plastic bracelet snapped around a small wrist. Miles wheezed behind a curtain while a nurse adjusted oxygen. Nora stood rigid, arms folded tight across her chest, eyes locked on the gap in the curtain like it might close forever if she looked away. Evan stood a step behind her. He didn't touch. He didn't speak. He let her lead. A doctor appeared, young, serious. He's stable, she said. But we need to run tests. This may not be a one-time thing. Nora nodded, absorbing the words without reacting. What does that mean? It means management, the doctor said. Medication, follow-ups, possibly lifestyle changes. And the cost? Nora asked quietly. The doctor hesitated. We'll have billing talk to you. After the doctor left, Nora leaned back against the wall and closed her eyes. Just for a second. Evan watched the moment land. The fear. The math. I can take care of it, Evan said low. Nora opened her eyes. Red-rimmed, clear. No, this isn't charity. This is my son. So is that? Evan said, gently nodding toward the curtain. And I won't watch you drown to prove a point. She stared at him. The line between pride and survival wavered. I won't let money decide whether he breathes, Evan continued. That's not a moral stance. That's cruelty. Silence pressed in. The hospital hummed around them. Nora's jaw worked. She looked past him, then back. Not everything needs to be solved by you. I know, Evan said, but this can be solved by me. Let it. She looked at the curtain again, at the small shoes beneath it. Then she nodded once. Not surrender, consent. Evan didn't celebrate. He stepped away and made a call. Quiet. direct. When he returned, Nora was sitting in a chair beside Miles's bed, holding his hand, whispering nonsense words just to keep him focused. By morning, Miles slept, his breathing even. Color returned to his cheeks. The crisis receded, leaving behind the wreckage. Billing came. Papers stacked. Nora listened, asked questions, took notes. Evan waited until she was done, then slid a card across the desk without comment. The clerk processed it. No fuss. In the car afterward, the city waking around them, Nora stared out the window. I hate that this was easy for you. Evan nodded. I hate that it isn't for everyone. That doesn't make it better. No, he said, but it makes it honest. They didn't go to the park that day. They went home. Nora tucked Miles into bed and sat beside him long after he fell asleep. Evan stood in the doorway, unsure whether to stay or leave. You can go, Nora said without turning. He didn't move. I can also stay. She turned then, exhaustion stripped of armor. I don't want to get used to this. Then don't, Evan said. Just use it when you need it. She laughed, once broken. That's not how people work. No, Evan agreed. It's how moments do. Later that afternoon, Evan's phone buzzed again. This time it was not Nora. Daniel Mercer's name lit the screen. There's a problem, Mercer said without preamble. The board's nervous. Evan closed his eyes. About what? About you, Mercer replied. Visibility. The hospital charge flagged, not because of the amount, because of the pattern. Evan leaned against the kitchen counter, careful to keep his voice low. Say it. They think you're getting distracted, Mercer said, that you're softening. There's talk of pushing a vote. Evan smiled faintly. On what? On limiting your discretionary authority. Silence followed. Then Evan said, Let them try. You'd risk it, Mercer asked. For this, Evan looked down the hall toward Miles's room. The door cracked, a small shoe visible on the floor. I'm not risking it, he said. I'm choosing it. That evening, Hannah called. Dad, she said. Mom says you might be busy again. I am, Evan said. With us? Hannah asked direct. Yes, he said. And with other things. She paused. You don't sound sorry. I'm not, Evan said gently. I'm careful. That's different, she said. It is. There was a beat. Can I come next weekend anyway? Evan smiled. I'd like that. When night fell, Evan sat alone on the balcony while the city settled. He felt the weight of the coming storm, the board, the scrutiny, the choice between control and consequence. Inside, Nora stood in the doorway. He's sleeping. Evan nodded. Good. She hesitated. You didn't have to stay. I wanted to. She walked out and stood beside him, not touching close enough to feel the warmth. I don't want to be someone who depends on you. Evan looked at her. Then don't. Be someone who walks with me when it's hard. She considered that the city reflected in her eyes. What happens when this costs you? Evan didn't look away. Then it costs me. She nodded slowly. That's not what I'm used to. It's what I'm choosing, Evan said. Below them, traffic moved. Lights changed. Life continued, indifferent and relentless. Inside the apartment, Miles breathed evenly, unaware of the lines being redrawn around him. Somewhere across the city, Hannah looked at the moon through her telescope, steadying herself with distance and trust. Evan Caldwell stood between two worlds he'd once kept separate, knowing the next move would not be quiet, not clean, and not reversible. And for the first time, he didn't reach for power to protect what mattered. He stayed. Snow started falling before dawn, the kind that didn't announce itself with drama, just a soft whitening of the world that made everything look briefly forgiven. Evan stood at the kitchen window with a mug gone cold in his hand, watching the street disappear under a thin, clean layer. The city looked calmer than it deserved. He knew better. By noon, the phones would start. By evening, the questions would turn sharp. Behind him, the apartment was quiet, except for the faint tick of the old radiator. Nora was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket she hadn't bothered to straighten. She'd insisted he'd take the bed. He hadn't argued, but he hadn't slept much either. At 7:20, his phone buzzed. Daniel Mercer again. "They've scheduled it," Daniel said. "No greeting, no small talk, emergency board session, this afternoon, 3. Evan nodded once, even though Daniel couldn't see him. "What's the angle?" Governance, Daniel replied. "They're framing it as concern, risk management. They'll say your personal entanglements are bleeding into corporate exposure. And the real issue, they don't like that you've stopped asking permission." Evan looked toward the hallway. Miles's door was still closed. Do they have numbers enough to make noise, not enough to win outright? But they're counting on pressure. Optics. Evan exhaled slowly. Let them count. After the call ended, Evan set the mug down untouched. He moved quietly, pulling on a coat, gathering his things. As he reached the door, Nora stirred. "You're leaving," she said, voice thick with sleep. "Yes." "For work," she added. It wasn't a question. He paused. "For a fight." She sat up, blanket slipping from her shoulders. "About us?" Evan turned fully then. About control. Nora studied his face. She saw the tension there, the restraint. "I don't want to be the reason you lose something you built." "You're not," he said. "You're the reason I'm willing to defend it differently." She didn't respond right away. "I don't know how this ends," she said finally. "Neither do I." She nodded, accepting the uncertainty. "Just don't disappear." "I won't." At the office, the building hummed with restrained energy. Assistants spoke softly. Doors closed too carefully. Evan moved through it all like weather, nodding, acknowledging, not slowing. The boardroom was already filling when he arrived. Faces he'd known for decades. Allies. Opportunists. Men who'd watched him build the company from a regional logistics firm into a global infrastructure machine. They'd followed him when he was ruthless. Now they wanted to test him because he'd become selective. The chair cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming on short notice." Evan took his seat. "You called it. Let's not waste time." A ripple moved around the table. One of the older directors leaned forward. "We're concerned, Evan. Recent decisions, expenses, appearances." "Appearances," Evan repeated. "You mean the hospital bill." And the repeated deviations from protocol, another added. "Personal discretion, no oversight." Evan folded his hands. "You're upset that I used my authority. We're worried about precedent," the chair said carefully. Evan leaned back. "Then let's talk precedent. This company exists because I took risks you wouldn't. Because I ignored consensus when it protected comfort over outcome. That's not the same?" Someone snapped. "It's exactly the same," Evan said, voice calm steel beneath it. "You're not afraid of loss. You're afraid of losing control over me." Silence followed. Daniel watched from the side, unreadable. "You want limits?" Evan continued. "You want me predictable, clean, untouched by the mess of real lives. That's not leadership. That's insulation." The chair stiffened. "We're voting," Evan nodded. "Then vote." The motion failed by 2 votes. Not decisive, not reassuring. As the meeting broke, Evan stood. "This won't be the last time," he said quietly. "Choose carefully who you are when it is." By the time he left the building, snow had thickened. The city moved slower, muffled. At the apartment, Nora was packing a small bag. Miles's inhaler, she said when she saw him. Just in case. I'm taking him to my sister's for the night. Evan nodded. That's smart. She hesitated. Did it go badly? No, he said. Not cleanly. She closed the bag. I hate that this follows us. Evan crouched in front of Miles, who was sitting on the floor with crayons drawing carefully. Hey, buddy, Evan said. You're going on a sleepover. Miles looked up serious. Are you coming? Not tonight. Miles nodded, accepting more than Evan expected. Okay. When they left, the apartment felt hollow again. Evan stood alone, the quiet louder now. His phone buzzed once more. Hannah. They said there was snow, she said. There is. Are you okay? He smiled faintly. I am. You sound tired. I am. There was a pause. Mom's worried you're making things complicated. I am. Hannah laughed softly. You always did that. Yes, Evan said. But this time I know why. After the call, Evan sat at the table, hands flat on the wood. The weight settled. The choice he'd made was no longer abstract. It had names, faces, consequences. That night alone in his own home for the first time in days, Evan slept deeply. He dreamed of 2 children laughing in snow and a line he could not cross or retreat from without losing himself. In the morning the news broke quietly. A short piece buried in the financial section. Speculation, board tensions, questions about leadership direction. Evan read it once, set the paper down, and went to make coffee. At noon he drove to Nora's sister's house. He didn't call ahead. He rang the bell and waited. Nora opened the door, surprise flickering into relief. Miles ran past her and wrapped his arms around Evan's legs. You came, Miles said. I said I wouldn't disappear. Nora watched him closely. Did it cost you? Evan knelt, meeting her eyes. Yes. She inhaled sharply. Then why are you smiling? Because it was worth paying. She stepped aside, letting him in. Outside, the snow kept falling, indifferent to boardrooms and bank accounts. Inside, 3 people stood together, uncertain but present, while a 4th waited across the city, unaware that her world was already shifting. Evan Caldwell had crossed the point of return, and the world slowly would notice. The snow melted faster than anyone expected, leaving the city raw and wet sidewalks, streaked with gray, the illusion of purity gone, but something sturdier left behind. Evan stood in the doorway of the townhouse just after sunrise, coat on tie loosened, watching Nora help Miles with his shoes. The boy was slower now, more careful, breathing steady, the inhaler untouched on the counter. The house smelled like coffee and toast, ordinary and grounding, in a way Evan still hadn't fully learned to trust. Your car's blocking my sister's, Nora said quietly. I'll move it. Miles looked up. Are you coming back later? Yes, Evan said without hesitation. Tonight. The word landed differently than it used to. Not a promise stretched thin by calendars and excuses. A statement. At the office, the tension had sharpened. Phones rang louder. People watched him longer. The board's failed vote had leaked, but not cleanly. Half-truths floated through the press. Power struggles, emotional distraction, questions about whether Evan Caldwell still had the edge that built the empire. Daniel met him in the elevator. They're regrouping. I know. They think you'll compromise. Evan looked at his reflection in the steel doors. Older than the man who started this company. Harder. Quieter. They're wrong. By midday, the final move arrived. A formal request for Evan to step back temporarily, leave the role of chief executive in neutral hands while the board conducted a review. It was framed politely. It was anything but. Evan read it once, then called for the full board to assemble by evening, not virtual, in person. The room filled slowly, the air tight with anticipation. Evan waited until everyone was seated before he spoke. "You're asking me to leave the company I built because I stopped pretending money absolves us from consequence," he said calmly. "You're afraid I've changed." No one interrupted. "I have," Evan continued. "I've changed because I remembered something you forgot. This company was never about control. It was about responsibility. To employees, to communities, to the people affected when our decisions ripple outward." A director scoffed softly. "This is about that woman and her child." Evan's gaze snapped to him. Sharp, measured. "This is about leadership." He stood, hands resting on the table. "I won't step aside, but I will offer you something better. Transparency, limits you can measure, and accountability you can't hide from." The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. Evan remained. When he left the building, night had fallen. The city lights flickered on, indifferent to his survival, but he felt steady, grounded. At Nora's sister's house, the windows glowed warm. Miles was asleep by the time Evan arrived, sprawled sideways on the couch, cartoon paused mid-frame. Nora met Evan in the hallway. "You look like you won," she said. "I didn't," Evan replied. "I just didn't lose." She studied him. "Is that enough?" He thought of Hannah, of her cautious hope, of the boardroom of the narrow margin, of the house he no longer wanted to return to empty. "It is tonight." They sat at the small kitchen table, shoulders almost touching, sharing silence, without fear of it stretching too far. "I need to tell you something," Evan said finally. "Not as a solution, as a fact." Nora nodded. "I'm going to bring Sarah here. Soon." Her breath caught just for a moment. "Your daughter?" "Yes." She didn't answer right away. Then, "She should meet Miles." "She will." "And me." "Yes." Nora folded her hands. "I won't pretend that doesn't scare me. It scares me, too." She met his eyes. "But I won't hide from it." The weekend arrived quietly. Evan picked Sarah up from the airport himself. She stepped through the sliding doors with a backpack too small for a child her age and a look too old for her face. She hugged him carefully, arms tight, testing if he was real. "You look different," she said. "So do you." At the townhouse, Nora waited by the door. Miles hovered behind her leg, peeking out. "This is Sarah," Evan said. Sarah looked at Miles. "You draw?" Miles nodded. "A lot." "That's good," Sarah said. "I don't." They smiled at each other, tentative but curious. Children unburdened by the weight adults piled on moments like these. That evening, they sat around the table eating takeout from mismatched containers. No speeches, no forced joy, just small observations, shared fries. A laugh when Miles spilled sauce and Sarah handed him a napkin without thinking. Later, Evan stood in the hallway and watched Nora tuck Miles into bed, her movements gentle, practiced. Sarah waited by the doorway. "She's nice," Sarah said quietly. Nora glanced back, surprised. "You're welcome to come say goodnight." Sarah did, awkwardly, earnestly. When the lights were off and the house settled, Evan and Nora stood alone again, the weight of the day pressing in. "It didn't break," Nora said. "No," Evan replied. "It didn't." Weeks passed. The press moved on. The board learned restraint. Sarah visited more often. Miles learned her laugh. Hannah came for dinner and stayed longer than planned. The house filled with noise and disagreement and warmth. On Christmas Eve, 1 year after the night that changed everything, the tree stood tall in the living room. Ornaments mismatched, lights uneven, perfect. Miles held the star arms shaking as Evan lifted him. Sarah steadied him from below. Nora watched, eyes shining, one hand pressed to her mouth. When the star settled into place, the room fell briefly silent. "This feels right," Sarah said. Evan nodded. He felt it too. Not triumph, not closure. Something deeper. Chosen. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and forgiving. Inside, 4 people stood close, no longer. Lost. No longer alone. Bound not by money or rescue or charity, but by presence and choice. If this story moved you, take a moment to like and subscribe and share your thoughts by commenting 3 words below. Share your thoughts.